Hello everyone, this is Yasir from Fairfax Quiz Center. In this video, we will learn few very important concepts. For example, object identification means how UFT identify different objects or controls. For example, text boxes, radio buttons, check boxes, etc. on the web page or in the desktop application. And then where it stores these objects and how they are re-identified when we run the script again. First, let's learn about the object repository. Let's create the sample test case to understand it better. Double-click on HP Unified Function Testing icon. Click on Continue button. Keep the web add-in and hit OK button. Go to New menu and select the option New Test. Select the GUI test and enter the new name, for example, Sample Test. Click on Create button. Just for your information, this is called the canvas view and it is the graphical representation of your test case for quick view and understanding. It is kind of workflow with complete hierarchy of different steps or actions in the test case. Let's go to the editor or expert view of the action one. Let's record the new script. Click on record button. UFT uses human-like technology to identify objects or different controls. When we are recording the script for any website page or other application, UFT tries to learn the properties of GUI object on which operation is performed. For example, in the case of Mercury Tours web application, username and password fields or web edits are GUI objects. UFT will learn the properties of these objects when we will enter the username and password in these fields. Now, what are those properties we will see soon, but for now let's enter username and password and record the script. My username is FairfaxQA and password is 123456. You can enter your username and password and after that click on sign in button. Let's close the browser and stop the recording. Now the properties of username and password web edit objects are stored by UFT. When we run the script by clicking on Run button, UFT compares the stored object properties with actual properties of the object on the GUI or screen and uniquely identify an object, sets its value, or do any other action that was recorded earlier. For example, UFT identified the username web edit and assigned it the value FairfaxQA. Now these actual objects, username and password in the running application are called runtime objects. The stored object, for example username and password by UFT with their properties are called test objects. This is UFT test object model. The test object properties are stored in Object Repository. The add-ins, for example web, mobile, etc. that we select in the startup screen helps in instructing the UFT the nature of object to be recorded so that it reduces the time taken to learn its properties. UFT stores objects and their properties in Object Repository to identify them during runtime. Now object could have large number of properties. For example, in website, the button can have following properties. Now the UFT cannot keep all properties in the object repository because the large size of object repository may badly hurt the performance. So object repository only stores limited number of properties to uniquely identify the object during runtime. We can select the properties to be saved during runtime for various environments and objects through object identification. To open the object identification window, go to Tools menu and select Object Identification. We can select the environment and UFT will populate list of all supported objects belonging to that environment. In a simple word, the environment is nothing, it's just a type of application, for example standard Windows application, then web application, and here is the list of all objects belonging to the web environment or web application. Some of them we already have worked with, for example browser, web edit, web button, and page, etc. Let's select the web edit. And here you would see two lists of properties for web edit. The first one is mandatory properties and the second is assistive properties. The mandatory properties will be stored by default for selected object while recording the script. Whereas the assistive properties, in case during recording of the script, UFT is not able to create a unique description of the object, it will borrow one assistive property to have unique identification of the object. Let's understand it by an example. First, let's add some assistive properties for web edit. Click on Add Remove button. And here is the list of assistive properties that you can add. Let's select few properties, for example class, height, HTML ID. Hit OK button. Now suppose while recording the script for any web page, there are more than one objects with the same mandatory properties. For example, same HTML tag, name and type. Then UFT will take one assistive properties and add it in the mandatory properties to keep each object with a unique identification. For example, UFT may take the class properties from assistive property list to mandatory properties list like this. Now if there are still more than one objects that has same mandatory properties like HTML tag, name, type and class, then UFT will take another assistive property in mandatory properties list and this process will go on until each object has unique identification. Now let's check the object repository for our recorded script. Click on Cancel button. Click on Object Repository icon. As discussed earlier, here are our test objects. You can see the root object with the name Welcome Mercury Tours and object type are classes browser. The next child object is Find a Flight Mercury and the child object type is page. Now let's expand the Welcome Mercury Tours page. And here we have three child objects of Welcome Mercury Tours page object. The username and password are web edit objects, whereas the sign in is the image button object. Click on username object. Here you can see three properties: type, name, and HTML tag. These are the three mandatory properties for username web edit object. The object property and its value is called the object description. The object description is used to uniquely identify the corresponding object. For example, for the username web edit object, the property name and its value username together can be termed as the object description for the username object. Similarly, you can check the properties of the password web edit. The name is password and the type is password2. And for the sign-in object, these are mandatory properties: image type, HTML tag, and art. And you can check the corresponding values of each property. So this is our object repository where UFT stores all test objects with their corresponding properties.